Okay, good evening, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to welcome everyone today to one of the first sessions kicking off this year's Oxford Farming Conference. I'm Mia Belfield, and I'll be hosting today's session on building climate resilience for the biggest job on earth. First, a little bit of housekeeping. There are no fire alarms planned. If you do hear one, it is the real thing, and the fire exits are here, and you make your way downstairs to the main entrance. So, let's kick things off. So like many of you probably here, I sat in the audience last January at the Oxford Farming Conference, and I listened to Will Evans, this year's director, announce the theme of diversity. And when he spoke about diversity in all its forms, in terms of people, in terms of cropping, in terms of farming philosophies, that's what really became the inspiration for the session that we've brought you here today. We've got 4 exceptional panellists from the UK and abroad, and they're going to come and share their knowledge and their experiences around the biggest challenge that bonds us all together as a society, and that is building resilience in the face of climate change to improve farm businesses, healthy food production, and a thriving natural environment. Farmers are now facing the brunt of extreme weather events, and data suggests that global warming could cause up to a 30% reduction in food production worldwide. Here in the UK, we're experiencing rising temperatures, and 10 of the warmest years on record have occurred since 2003. But this doesn't change the fact that an ever-growing population needs access to nutritious food. In recent remarks, the NFU did a survey, and it said that 82% of people felt the UK needs to grow more food. And this is all against the backdrop of climate change mitigation, global economic shocks, and changing consumer habits. We must find a way to deliver a more resilient food production system to deliver this. And farming across the world has the same objectives. It's about food production, and it's about remaining profitable. But it's such a unique industry. Farming happens in thousands, millions of different ways. And that means we've got access to millions of peers who can share their own experiences, what's worked for them and what's not. And that's really what this session is about today. So our 4 panellists join us in the spirit of shared experience and learning to discuss practical solutions that they've implemented on their farms and for their businesses to build resilience. Before I welcome our panellists to the stage, I'd like to invite Neil Kay, Vice President for West Europe, to talk about the biggest job on earth and what our hopes are for today's session.
Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome and a Happy New Year from my side. So, the biggest job on earth has been at the heart of BASF for over a decade. The aim is to provide visibility and appreciation for people that grow our food and look after the stewardship of the environment. The biggest job on earth is about knowledge and experiences, people within our food production system to raise the awareness and the importance of farming and help them tackle the challenges we face. We believe the conversations need to take place. No format is right or wrong. I think we work in all sorts of diverse different environments, from working in education, technical groups with our customers, to national conferences. It's about sharing and raising awareness. I think there's an increased awareness of the challenges around climate change, and we saw that it was highlighted in COP28 last month. Feels like a long time ago now. And what was clear was also highlighted is that these challenges cannot be addressed by one person, one government, or one organisation. We need to share the challenges we face, the farming philosophies that can help us, and how we make the change and the progress needs to be a discussion we have together. Does anyone know what VUCA means? No hands? I thought it was an exotic drink that I had around Christmas time. But it's a new buzzword that we're hearing a lot in the industry, clearly not in Oxford in the UK. But it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it feels like we've tasted a lot of that in recent years. I think that I come from a small town in Manchester, and when I think about climate, I come from a place called Stalybridge. It's in the east part of Manchester, and if you watch the news over Christmas, we had our first ever tornado, which kind of brings the whole thing close to home. We've never had a tornado before. I hope we don't have another one in the short term. But you see now that if we look at where we are in terms of excessive rainfall and droughts, they're becoming more and more common. Late frosts are affecting the wine industry in France. Late harvests are affecting the potato industry in the Benelux, in the Netherlands. In Northwest Europe alone, my understanding is around 20% of the winter crops are not in the ground. And in the UK, I think it's around 30, and it could be higher. And we still have crops that have been drilled that we don't know what kind of condition they're going to be in. So we still see growers adapt. They can adapt, and one thing I'd say cautiously excited about is how the wine industry will evolve in the UK. I lived in Germany for a while, and I never took to the red wine in Germany, but maybe I will take to the white wine in the UK. In Sweden, we have one of our panelists here, Martin. What you see happening in Sweden is, due to the climate change and the temperature change, there's actually going to be more land in the future available for food production. So we are adapting, and change is necessary. If I look back over previous decades, we have a saying in BASF, but also in the industry, that no one season is the same. Food security is starting to become on people's mind once again. You see the war in Ukraine continues to rage on. The conflict in the Middle East has started again. And the Suez Canal now, we have British and American armed forces now monitoring the canal to protect the vessels that are going through. So what is for sure is food security and local production is more and more important than it ever has been before. Climate change can be an overwhelming topic, though, and it's increasingly complex. I think we continue to see extreme weather conditions on the news and in the press across the globe, and it can often be a little bit disheartening that how do we manage that? What can we do? My view is that we should focus on what is in our control and what we can influence. And I think farmers cannot predict extreme weather conditions, but they can implement strategies where they aim to reduce the impact and help their businesses in times of uncertainty and what they don't know. Today we brought together some panels and speakers who are doing just this, whether it's ways they look at improving the water management, the soils on their system, technology, innovation adoption, through adapting crop rotations, many different topics, and I'm excited to learn more about that and how these people are taking positive steps to make their businesses more resilient in times of change. However, there is no one silver bullet. I think technology will become an enabler, but as we move on that journey towards decarbonising our industry and trying to meet the demands that society is putting on us, having the conversation is critical. And the biggest job on earth is about creating a platform to support our industry, to have that conversation around environmental, economic and societal requirements. I'm thrilled to be opening today. It's focused on climate resilience, as you can see, and I'm excited to hear the different views from the panel. Some of them I know very, very well, Mike. Others I've met before, and others I've meeting for the first time today. So we passionately believe at BASF that farming is the biggest job on earth, and we're deeply committed to learning and engagement, as this will continue to build the knowledge of our industry, help build resilience and support our progress towards a more sustainable agricultural food production system. Thank you.
Now for the main agenda. So please can I invite to the stage Martin Anderson, Mary Bott, Hannah Darby and Mike Green. We've all been told to sit below our pictures, so we're all like, well.
I'm Hannah. Hello. Don't worry about this.
Brilliant. So Martin joins us from Sweden. He's an 8th generation farmer. His enterprise is mixed arable and livestock, with 90% of it including a really wide crop rotation. And I do need my notes here, of winter wheat, barley, oats, grass seed, spinach seed, OSR, carrots, sugar beet, alfalfa and pumpkin. And even then, I know I'm definitely not getting the lot. Martin, hopefully. Martin joins us from Sweden, where he's part of our Biggest Job on Earth initiative called Follow a Farmer, where every season we follow 7 growers in Finland, Norway and Sweden, and the idea is to inform, engage and entertain about on-farm practices. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Mary joins us from Iowa in the USA. She is the CEO of the Global Farmer Network, which was established in 2002 with a similar ethos to the Biggest Job on Earth about raising the profile of farming for trade, economy, and economic and societal issues. Hannah is a 4th generation farmer farming with her uncle in Huntingdon near Cambridge, and she farms on a range of soil types from peat in heavy clay. She employs rotation with cover crops and companion crops to produce sustainable cereals and legumes. And water is an integral part of what Hannah does. It's a key factor in her decision making, and the climate change issue of not enough water or too much drives her innovative spirit with soils. And finally, sadly, our 4th panelist, William Pitts, couldn't join us today because he's ill. But luckily, we have a fantastic replacement in BASF's very own Mike Green. Mike is our Agricultural Sustainability Manager, and in 2021, him and William created Project Fortress, which is a 5-year field trial which is aiming to improve the soil health, improve carbon sequestration, and the yield of the crop. Who's going to share more about that today? So Mary, I'm going to come to you first, and I'm going to need my clicker. Can you tell us a bit more about the Global Farmer Network and some of the stories you're hearing about climate impact?
Absolutely. And number one, thank you to BASF for inviting us here, being part of this conversation, because it's an important conversation to be had. Farmers talking to farmers and policy leaders and business and agribusinesses. And just for a little bit of my street cred, I'm also the daughter of a farmer and ran a farm for a number of years. I still tell my 91-year-old dad I'm really still kind of farming. It just looks different now, but it's an important part of agriculture, telling that story. The Global Farmer Network was started by 5 Iowa farmers. It's now in 65 countries. The mission has not changed that much. It's important to talk about what you are doing, who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why it matters to everybody else. So the Global Farmer Network continues to be made up of farmers. We call them influencers because they're willing to tell their story and talk about it, not a story that's based just on somebody's PowerPoint slide, but on real data coming off their farm and real experiences. And in this space with climate resilience, so important. And we'll talk about them also being collaborators, willing to work, share knowledge with each other and with agribusiness, with policy leaders as well. So I've been invited just to bring, maybe broaden the conversation a bit beyond the UK into, number one, letting you know you're not alone in this climate challenge that you're facing. We have a WhatsApp group that's pulled together. I said 265 farmers active in it now, but all over the world. And what I can tell you very quickly is that the challenges of global climate change and erratic weather is a global challenge. It's being felt everywhere. The challenges on how they're adapting to it all look a little bit different, but there are some really cool, important stories we had. This one's from Uruguay. Gabriel Carbal is, he's been farming. He calls himself a farmer with no farm. He literally leases all of his land. He has over 100 landowners that he works with. So can you imagine all of the issues that you're dealing with that? They just came off of the 3 driest years in Uruguay history. So looking at Latin South America, that first photo is the one. The first 16 days, is it 16 or 11 days of December, they had, I can't even read it. First 16 days, 11 inches of rain, or the other way around. You can read my screen better than I can. Significant erratic behavior, but he's a member of APRISEED, which is a no-till organization. He talks about that as a program. This is out of Netherlands. Anasheen ten Have Mellema, talking about the wettest weather that she has seen. She and her husband have been farming about 30 years, mainly pork production, but also arable crops. and has never seen that much water stand in one space at one time. This is coming out of Japan. Soichi Tokumoto, stunning farmer. He's got a great story. I'd love to talk to you and tell you about the rest of his story. I'm here to help you understand a little bit from where they're coming from. Soichi has told us that Japan has invested significantly in irrigation infrastructure, not only the cost, but putting it all there. There is enough irrigation infrastructure in Japan to circle the earth 7.5 times. Yet this year, this erratic weather, it's not been able to challenge, to really handle too much water or not enough water. And his words are, we need seed technology that handles heat and drought and wet and floods, and you start laying the issues on it. So the importance of technology. And this one is coming out of India. Shekhar is actually a research scientist. He's from India. He was in the US, worked at Cal Poly. He was actually on the team that created the Pringle potato chip, for a little side note. He went back to India. He's very involved in agritourism, but he's used his research background to say, how do we deal with the challenges of climate within our space? He's looking at India specifically. What you're seeing here is the Saguna research, oops, I'm gonna go back. The Saguna research, Saguna regenerative technology. It started with rice, but what he's learned is he's using different pieces of regenerative agriculture, no-till, different ways to manage water quality, always focused on soil health, and literally changing the ability to produce good crops in India with lots of different challenges. So lots of different parts to that story. So thank you.
Thanks so much. And Martin, I'm going to come to you next. So you join us from Sweden, and you've been farming since childhood. I remember you telling me. And what have you seen change in terms of climate change over the past few years?
Well, there is a change, that's for sure. The droughts are coming more often. Last big drought we had was 18, and it was quite severe. I think you had a bit of that here as well at that time. The big drought before that was, I think it was 2008. But since 2018, we had very dry seasons every other year. So it's hard to manage that, but we put in a lot of irrigation to manage it. But the droughts come more often, and there are higher temperature or more severe, and the wets are even wetter than normal.
And Hannah, can I ask for your input there? What's the impact you've seen?
Well, this morning I asked the guys on the farm before I left today, how would you describe farming the last few years? And the word they used was random. So I think random really highlights everything that we're seeing. Unpredictable, it's been very unpredictable, I think, as many will know, being able to plant crops this year in particular, actually get things established. So we now are mostly combinables. Well, we're all combinables. We've just given up growing sugar beets, which is quite a big thing for us. And it was quite difficult lifting our sugar beet this year because of the wet weather. But now we also have, fields that are flooded. We've got fields, as Neil was saying, where we don't know if that wheat is going to establish. But then we can go to the other extreme of basically having these really intense dry periods with extreme heat. And the other thing that I wasn't sure about when I was thinking about this question was about the sunlight that we're getting in the summer. It seems to me that we're getting a lot more dull summers, which I think is maybe also having an impact. Don't know if that's climate change, but it's just something that I'm experiencing on the farm. And the thing that scares me probably the most is the risk of fires, if I'm honest. So the summers of 2022 and 2019 were really traumatic for us. There was a lot of combine fires around our neck of the woods. I would say, in general, the speed of, is it climate change? I've been farming for 10 years. It just seems like the rate of change of whatever we're calling this is progressing rapidly.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing we've noticed, the biggest difference is difference. No season is ever the same anyway, but now it's much more erratic and harder to control. So I'm going to move on to talk about water. Water is a huge topic in this space. And Mike, I'm going to come to you and ask you to tell us a bit about Project Fortress and what is the importance of water and its management in that project.
Cool. Mary, could you, oh, you're busy. I'll do it myself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You can't get the panelists, I tell you. Actually, I'm just going to hold that one just for a second, but it's what you're saying about random and 10 years. So I was actually fortunate to speak at Oxford in 18, and I was on a platform where I used this book by David Bellamy, Conflicts in the Countryside, The New Battle for Britain, and he wrote that in 2005, and I was using it to describe how the big battle was about conservation and environment. And I think we all get that, and we're trying to join that up, and that's not an issue now. And I've read through it, and I've had a look. I couldn't find anything about climate at all in that, which is only sort of 18 years ago. And then you think about Oxford in 2018, so 6 years ago, we weren't really talking about climate. So never mind 10 years. It feels like the urgency is there, and I don't know whether it was always there and we never named it. We seem to name everything these days as a storm. But generally, I just thought it was really interesting to go back through that. Water, yes, we've got a picture of Fortress on there. So William, it's a real shame he can't be. I wanted you all to meet him, because he's such a lovely and knowledgeable guy. And what we're going to do is make a video next time at the farm, and then we'll circulate it to all of you if you want it, make it available, because I think his story from him is really important. But we had this field at the farm. It's heavy clay, and it was just not doing anything. And we were stood at the top going, so what's the risk in this field? And he basically said, it is sunlight. I can't control that. And it is rainfall and or water, and then it's rainfall in that sense, and holding on to it or not being able to get rid of it. And we tried to take this field that was stuck, and we divided it into different treatments that we maybe have time to discuss later, to try and see if we could restart it in the face of all this stuff that we can't control. We've got no idea. We've had periods where we've had so much water, the drains are just running, but then the field resets, and then we don't have enough. And we've put operations in place that have actually artificially dried out the soil, and then we have a drought. So we can't pick the technology. So this 5-year project is actually trying to say, can some of the really wacky stuff, so we've got herbal lays with sheep in it, we've got 1 year out of production, 2 years out of production, which are quite novel ideas. Most people struggle if they haven't got something under control for 3 months, but to take 2 years out to try and build a change in your system that can cope with things you don't know what they're going to be, what the climate's going to throw at you. And he did say his 2 biggest risks are not the innovation that we might supply or they can buy or anything else. It's sunlight and it's water, because they have no control of that at all. And I think Fortress is in year 3, and we're about to sort of release some information next year just to help people understand that some of the things are a panacea and they will work quickly, but actually resetting systems or farms to deal with this more urgent thing isn't tomorrow. It might be 5 years, it might be 10 years, 20 years. And we have to try and get people in this really long horizon in their head to try and work out. It's not just change it next. Can I buy a solution? Can I buy the fix tomorrow? How much do you want? Mm-hmm. Doesn't work like that.
But also about how, having that willingness to try something new as well.
Yeah, and you have to
fail. Trying that rapidly and fail, I think, is really important.
Not the Project Fortress is a failure, I just put that on record, seeing that we're being filmed.
Martin, I'm going to come to you next. So how important is water and its management on your farm?
Oh, water is everything. If you get a dry year and you don't have the possibility to irrigate, then it will ruin the quality of carrots. The onions will get small, and you will get less paid as well. So we put in a lot of management and effort into to be able to irrigate, and we farm about 280 hectares, and I think it's just about 10 to 15 hectares today we can't irrigate. But before that, of course, you have to have fields in good condition and a good drainage system as well. And if you don't have those in good conditions, if you put in maybe 25 or 30 mils of rain a couple of weeks before you're supposed to harvest, and you will get help from above and get another 25 millimeters of rain, then you got a wetland if you don't have a good drainage. So you always start with good drainage before you put irrigation in. Mm-hmm. It's all about efficiency. You have to tend to your crops like if there were a part of you to get the good yields.
And Hannah, can you input into that? How important is water and its management on your farm?
Well, as everyone else has said, water is critical. Water and sunlight are critical. I always think when I look at the farm that the water, when we want rain, it always moves round us, and when we don't want it, it always falls on us. I was having a little look actually back at some data, and we usually have about 480 mil of rain apparently annually. Some years it can be like 360, and some years it can be 740, although that was 2019, so if anyone can remember what happened then. I don't like to remember it too well. About half of our farm is peat. And peat is very interesting. In its natural state, when it's undrained, it can retain large amounts of water. But as it becomes drier, it's a lot harder to get it wet again. And this is something that, you know, I said to my uncle as I was chatting about this, and it is a phenomena when I was actually looking it up in scientific papers. So sometimes that little bit of water doesn't do that much for us. We have always done things to try and manage water on the farm. So we have a reservoir. We historically grew potatoes and sugar beet, and we've always let water from that reservoir back into the fen during summer periods. We fill the ditches up, and therefore we kind of find that the headlands of our fields are the most productive, which is kind of the reverse to what I find on our more clay soils. It is interesting that actually we lose a lot of the water from our reservoir before it even gets anywhere near a ditch by the amount of evaporation and reed growth we have. So it's not ideal, and I know many of you probably are aware of some of the challenges going on about how we should manage peat for the future, and water in that space and having enough water is something that I could talk for hours about, and the fact that the fens aren't flat. But anyway, sorry, that wasn't the topic. The other things that we do on the farm is we try our best to maintain constant living roots. I mean, I try, but when I talk about that, I'm thinking things like cover crops, companion crops, and trying to get something in the ground straight after we've harvested. So in wet times, a cover crop will act like a water pump. So it will be just circulating that water and stopping things from getting flooded. And then in the summer, if we have got something growing there, that will then hopefully reduce the soil temperature slightly. And you can almost sometimes, when you drive across the fens in a very early time in the morning, if you've got something growing when it's hot, you can actually see the kind of transpiration and that reverse kind of that rainforest effect. We're using a diversity of plant species to alter rooting depth and architecture as well when we're doing this. And we've gone in the last few years to growing different crops together. So we're growing, this will come into the next question that you have, but we're growing things like peas and oats together, and oats and beans. And we're also predominantly no-till now to try and keep those soil pores open.
And Hannah is right. Our next question is going to be about crop rotations, and I'm really interested to know, how has your crop rotations changed over time in the kind of the face of a changing climate? And Martin, can I come to you?
Yeah, well, with 10 to 12 different crops, it's a tough work, but it also enables me to be able to put in a valuable crop, even if it could be nematodes, for instance, and then I have a solution. If I have a big problem with something, I read up on it, and the solution might be another crop, and for me it's not a big problem to start another one, and I'll just try it. You have to learn from earlier experience. And for instance, we had one nematode that it goes on barley, it goes on winter wheat, it goes on sugar beets, it goes on a little on oilseed and on grass, but not on oats. Okay, so I'll start to grow oats. And it won't go on potatoes either. So I start the crop rotation. In 3 years, I don't have that nematode anymore. So you have to solve your issues.
And as we talked about, the kind of the ethos behind the biggest job on earth is about sharing experiences. And as I talked about at the beginning, we have a huge industry to kind of share from. And I kind of want to ask each of you, what's something that you've trialed in your farm or your business that you want to shout about and you're proud of? So Mary, could I come to you first?
Well, I'm going to share some stories from some of the other farmers that we work with, and one of them is Aproseed. We have a number of farmers in Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, who are very effective no-till facilitators. Many of those strategies were started down in that. And so what has been really exciting for us to watch is what we would call south-to-south knowledge transfer. The impact of no-till, that technology, along with the different crop protection products and all the other things that help support that type of technology and strategy. They're sharing with farmers across Africa. Ghana, Guinea, and Sierra Leone are the first ones. It's been financed by the African Development Bank. But what has been fundamental to everybody, I think, in this room is that farmers learn really well from other farmers, that it works really well when you get to see it instead of just reading it, or even a short YouTube or an instructional or even 4 years of university. There's something about working side by side with another farmer or seeing what they've done and what works, and that's been working within that strategy. So I think this farmer-to-farmer knowledge transfer in the no-till space has been an exciting story that we're seeing specifically in areas that have not only climate changes, but they have real government policy challenges and a lot of other challenges as well. So finding things that work, farmers to work with each other, and then sharing that information has been a stunning story of success.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I have one thing to do with what you also have to be very keen on to do is to put back organic matter into your soil, and in your rotation, let it rest. So when I put in my, for example, seed for grass production, my cover crop is a peas and oats in companion, and I drill in the grass in that, and then I have a 2-year crop that I combine. I take the straw out for my cattle, I put the manure back in. The year after the grass, I put in sugar beets, and the year after that it's spring wheat, and then you can rotate back and you put grass in, and you get a lot of coal into the soil.
Hannah, can I ask you to elaborate a bit more on your crop rotation and then share something that you're really proud of?
Yeah, so there's been quite big changes since I came back onto the farm. Like I've mentioned, we grew potatoes, many reasons why we gave that up. When I first came back on the farm, I thought it was a good idea to make money to do that again, so I let someone else grow potatoes on the farm. We moved away from kind of anything that needs extensive cultivations, from the effect of wind blow on the fens, that was a big one, soil erosion through wind blow, and also the fact that when the soil just gets that dry, it's very hard to establish anything. So that's the first thing that's really changed, the lack of roots. We've now kind of gone into crops where we can combine them, and we are together, so things like peas and oats, beans and oats. And what I'm learning in the last few years of doing it, it's probably 3 years of doing it, is some years one thing works better and some things the other crop works better. It won't be the way around that I thought it was going to be, but we will harvest something, and we'll harvest more of what we will harvest more crop in total than we would have done of one thing on its own, even if it's a little bit more. So in general, I feel like it's financially beneficial, although it does pose a lot of challenges with how you manage that crop.
And Mike, so you're 3 years into Project Fortress. What's something you've learned that you're kind of proud of and you want to shout about?
It's interesting, actually. The part of the philosophy, I mean, William was really interested in herbal lays and their sort of 3 or 4 year soil benefit, and then of course we needed livestock to graze it. We could have done a zero graze, but actually we brought sheep in. It's interesting you say about the manure. Sheep are very effective in grazing a third, trampling a third, leaving a third. Concentrated fuel pellets coming out the back of a sheep, which are really good manure. And if you can't get from manure any other way, but they do take an awful amount of time to manage properly. I mean, if you just throw them in and then they just graze everywhere, they can do more damage. So actually having livestock and that kind of manure machine is time consuming. And when you're a really tight business for time doing all the other stuff, and I think that's one of the things that's really difficult is to actually do that. One of the things about rotations is the fact that we've put that in and that we're trying to grow to try and take cropping out for 1 year, 2 years or 3 years, but it all owes the business money. So how do you get something? Do you just look to an incentive, say through the incentive scheme in the UK, through Natural England and DEFRA, or do you find business to buy it, or do you just accept in the climate change that you may have fields that aren't productive for a year, And you may reset them over 1 or 2 or 3 years, but then they're in production for another 7, 8 or 10 years, and the business just has to accommodate that. I mean, that's quite a difficult thing. But some of the cover crops we're putting in, you know, we've mentioned cover crops earlier, and some people just do it because they think it's right. We're trying to be intelligent about it, and we're finding if you're trying to sequester carbon in your fields, and obviously there's a zone where it's circulating, below 30 centimetres, you can actually put some really deep cover crops that are sequestering carbon that's not touched. But they also do the drainage thing, and they also produce that sort of a soil structure benefit. So that's one of the good things about rotation. Was there another question? I can't remember.
No, brilliant.
Enough.
Mike never normally sticks to the questions. So now I'm actually going to take the opportunity to open it out to you guys. So we've got our 4 panellists here today. We've got experiences from the UK, from abroad. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask in the audience?
Have we got a microphone?
It's a question for Mary.
Have we got a microphone? Sorry. Go on. Yeah, thank you.
I'm ready.
So we can hear you.
There we go.
Good evening. Lovely to see you. It's a question for Mary, but the whole panel, and it's quite a big one. Do you think the challenges the globe faces at the moment, and you've all discussed your own sort of challenges, is now beyond the farmers, the agribusiness managers, and the food producers of the globe?
It's beyond, what? Finish that last part of your question.
Without trying to answer my own question, what I mean is, do you think the challenges of climate change and the challenges the globe faces, whether you believe in climate change or not, is now beyond the people that essentially work the land and produce the food? And what I mean by that is, you've all sat there and basically told us all your challenges, and all those challenges impinge your business. So my point is sort of, how do you see that resolving itself?
Thank you for that question, and absolutely not. I think that there are tremendous opportunities. I think Shakar is probably one of the first ones, that small slide coming out of India talking about, here's the institutional way we've grown rice, the way we've grown maize, the way we've grown all these other things, no longer sustainable. Climate, clearly one of the challenges. They've had some policy challenges in their country in the past as well. But they're really becoming innovative in figuring out different ways to grow the crops that are staple crops to their communities, but doing it in a more resilient way. You know, resilience is the ability to spring back or to survive something, to adapt to it. And so how do we adapt to this changing world? We have farmers in Ukraine as well who are members of this, and they have a whole new level of challenges that most of us hope we never have to deal with. They're still farming because Case will tell us that nature doesn't stop because there's a war. So they're still trying to get things, and they're trying to manage, if I can't get nitrogen, if I can't do this, if I can't harvest at this particular time, how do I still produce food, not only for myself, but for the broader community as well? And it's become, I think, the times of probably the most innovation. I'll also talk about some of the farmers that we have in Africa, Southeast Asia, the developing world. It's probably the most innovative farmers that I know, purely because in our eyes, they probably have the most important challenges that they're dealing with. And challenge creates or drives innovation. And so that looks different. Most of them will tell you the most important toolbox I need right now is seed technology. Seed that's tolerant to salinity, seed that's tolerant to heat, seed that's tolerant to too wet, seed that's tolerant to all these different things. I need information on how to use this seed. I need information on what works. I need information from farmers on what doesn't work, because I don't need to make that, not a mistake, but I don't need to go through that path if that's already been done and it doesn't work. The other piece is the infrastructure pieces. There is a great program in Kenya, which is really in Africa, a pretty advanced, pretty stable government. They have a lot of things going for them. And they were creating mobile weather apps. And if you look at the United Nations information on Kenya, it tells you that mobile phone coverage in Kenya is 117%. So therefore, more than one phone per person in average, right? So if you create an app and with best intentions, you're bringing this technology, in this case for weather forecasting, down to the farmer so he could actually use it. That sounds perfect. What they missed in that piece was that less than 30% of the phones in Kenya are smartphones. You can create all the apps you want, but if you can't access it on a phone, so finding out what those gaps are and doing immediate next steps, instead of always focusing on the macro, but finding those micro pieces that can make a difference, that can actually move to the next step, I think we're in probably an exciting time, not without its challenges, clearly not without its challenges. But there are opportunities that are persistent, and we had and I think this is probably indicative of what you talk about. We bring together a group of 20 farmers every year. Last year we did it twice, once in Argentina. We did it once in the United States. We're actually going to be back in the UK in June of this year doing the same thing, 20 farmers from around the world. Last lightning round question is, are you optimistic or pessimistic about agriculture in your country? Without exception, everybody said optimistic. Not where with all the challenges that they're facing, but finding some opportunities. So I thank you for the question, but I think the opportunities like we have here at the Oxford Farming Conference to be in a room together, to ask each other questions, what works, what doesn't, is unbelievably valuable and will serve everybody well.
You got there.
David Exwood. So my question is, one of the drivers of sustainable farming is clearly to farm with less interventions, maybe less cultivations, pesticides, fertilizers. And yet in the face of an ever more volatile climate, probably one of the answers is to use more interventions. How do farmers balance up those competing pressures?
For me, it's all about efficiency. The land that I farm, I have to do it the best way that I can. If I put in a certain amount of nitrogen or potassium or whatever, or organic manure for that matter, I have to make sure that I can take a crop out. If I don't take a crop out, the nitrogen will go to the Baltic Sea, and I will have another issue. If I don't take a crop out, I don't feed the world. So I think the solution is not to do it organic or the organic way or conventional way. The solution is somewhere in between. You have to take out high yields and be efficient in what you're doing. Is that good enough? Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say. Just trying to justify the inputs that you are using. So rather than doing things maybe in a blanket way in the past, because that's what you do, thinking about whether that application is actually needed. And some things, yeah, we definitely probably will need more of, and some things we may be able to do without. I've got a very interesting experiment with 40 hectares of wheat that didn't get a preem, so we'll just see what happens, won't we?
I was going to say as well, the interesting bit is we've kind of gone down a reductionist route, it feels, over a while, and you have this headline figure of 7 to 9 billion of the world population, and sure, we waste too much food, we consume too many calories. That was actually one of my successes, was getting people to talk about food waste, calorie consumption, seasonality, all that sort of stuff. But if we want, and we've got the squeeze with environment and then housing and roads and development, and we're in an island, but obviously globally we've got this climate impact on, there's various data that show places that are getting so warm that in order to feed their own population, never mind exporting, they're going to have to remove nature land. Well, that's a difficult place. So the answer to the question is we have to get back to maybe finding that balance where the land that can actually support a high output can also then release land to support nature and connectivity and water storage and stuff. And you can't necessarily get there. There are all sorts of innovations that will drive, a bit to your question as well, that agriculture has a debt to pay, but it also has a positive bit of solution. And we can do that with soil sequestration and all those things which will drive yield, but we can do that as well with nature. We have to do it with nature as well.
I think we've got some questions at the back over here.
Okay.
I'm Henry Reynolds from Northamptonshire. We happen to farm next to William Pitt, so unfortunately we see some of these things going on over the fence. A lot of what we're talking about here is fairly medium to long-term interventions, and those examples you gave from William, taking some land out for the benefit of 10 years, taking it out for a couple of years for the benefit of 10 years is all very well, but speaking as a farmer with a foot in both the owner-occupier camp and the tenant camp, when I'm on an FBT that might last 3 or 5 years, I don't see where the space necessarily is for that sort of intervention. So I wondered really if the panel had got any sort of views on where we might go with this kind of short-term driver that we have to actually make money off those bits of land for a shorter term than you're talking about with these interventions.
Oh, okay, everyone's looking at me. Absolutely right. And if you have a tenancy, you have to pay. These things owe you money. What we are finding in that first year where we had a 1 year out of production and we resowed the cover crop twice, we got 2 tons per hectare more than all the surrounding stuff, all things being equal. And there's a legacy probably of a 1 ton the next year. So in terms of what that can pay is getting towards it. What it might do is reset your soil. We don't actually have land, not that I'm aware of anyway, David might say, let us know, but we aren't actually abandoning land in this country, but we do elsewhere in the globe where we can't farm on it. And actually, you may find that this sort of taking land out that's sub-production 2 or 3 years brings it back into production to allow you to do something. But you're absolutely right, it has to pay, and that's what part of the project is, that maybe there are government incentives that are actually supporting the seed crop for that as well. So everyone working together, it's part of this communication piece, and maybe there's other parts of industry that are looking for environmental goods to help them offset some of their stuff. We really just all have to work together in that side.
Can I add that word collaboration? We use it so freely sometimes, but it is key to making everything work. We have some farmers who talk specifically about the research that's being done in agriculture right now. Climate obviously is a global challenge, and there's a lot of dollars being committed globally to dealing with climate. We have a young farmer she's 37, she's been farming on her own for a number of years. She's from Zimbabwe, Ramisa Mashumba, and she raised the question following COP28, how many of those committed billions of dollars are going to actually go into the hands of farmers so that next steps can be done? And I think to your part, the economic sustainability of a farm is a big part of the resilience factor. If you're not economically sustainable, resilience doesn't really matter because you are not going to be able to spring back next year or in 5 years. And so being able to collaborate with those who are doing the research from the beginning to implementation is certainly one of the things that we talk about. I think it was Suichi Tokamutu, the one from Japan, who said, in fact, I wrote it down, he's one of the toolboxes he wanted in answer to my question, technological innovation that can be implemented in the field, not innovations to obtain research budgets. And I'm thinking, hello. and it's easy to say, but it's a reality. It's collaborating from the very begin all the way through implementation, and then everybody sees that value, and you check the boxes of environment and nature, the economic piece, but also the ability to feed not just the world, but our communities and our families as well. And so it's an important piece of that whole thing.
I'm going to pick up on that collaboration and that idea of openness, and we always talk about sharing our positive experiences when have things gone well, but actually this idea of partnership is we need to share when things don't go well so other people don't make the same mistakes. And is there anything that you guys have tried on your farms where you think, I'm not going to try that again?
Loads. Anyone who knows me knows that I love a good trial, and they don't always go well. Maybe different fertilizers, products, I don't know, I've tried them all. More recently, I think the whole mindset of trying one thing in isolation, so thinking, oh, my winter wheat hasn't worked, I'll put a spring wheat in, and I'll treat it in this way with this herbicide without realizing then the knock-on effect to my cover crop, which I deem as vitally important as my cultivation for the next crop. So looking at things in isolation. So that's a bit of a mindset thing. And also making decisions based on someone telling you that they think it's a good idea, rather than actually you thinking it's a good idea, which when you're stressed is quite easy to take someone else's opinion. But we all, as farmers and landowners, growers, whatever we are, we know our land better than anyone else. So yeah, they would be my two things that I reflected on.
Thank you for your openness.
Back to that question, I can relate to that some way, because we have different soil types, from very sandy soils that get eroded by both wind and water, and we have clay content up to 26% maybe or so. And I can grow all my kind of crops on all the soil types. But if I go back to the efficiency question, it's way better to have some of the crops on the sandy soils and put in a lot of water to get the quality, and do less work with the clay soils with different crops. But I can definitely grow winter wheat on a sandy soil, and I can put in loads, maybe 300 millimeters of rain, but I will still get only 6 or 7 tons per hectare. But if I irrigate a dry year, irrigate the clay soil one time, I get 11, 12 tons. Yeah. So where do you put your crops? It's very important.
We've talked a bit about what we've got in the toolbox to help us, and I'd quite be interested to hear from all of you. What's one thing that's missing from the toolbox to help you build resilience from climate change? And I think Hannah's laughing because I said one.
No, I was actually laughing again. I asked my uncle, and he said a crystal ball. So I don't think that was quite what you were getting at, was it? I mean, I genuinely think that if we could have some really good long-term weather forecasting, it would help us to understand a bit more, maybe, idea of, of how we could adapt ourselves. It's always demoralising when you think you're going one way and actually something completely different gets thrown at you.
I think we've got most of the tools. I think some people like shiny tools, new tools. The most useful tools is a spade, and those of you that farm will know you should have a spade. And the climate smart farmer uses a spade until they hit rock, because they want to understand what's in their soil. It's not just the first spade out. I think the other bit is it's a tool. It's not really a tool. It's an output of clever people, because we've got this balance to make of all these things. And we can't do it. There's too many asks of the land for everything that we want. And the climate people need to the smart people need to come together and work out with the climate how we can deliver it all. And that bit of collaboration is a bit driven. At the moment, it's still segmented, and it would take a big climate effect for people to say, do you know what? We need to do this together. From all sorts. Doesn't matter what kind of farm you have or what system you do or what country. And I do feel that's the tool that's missing, is this, and I don't want a calamity to drive it, but that's probably where we need to go.
Along with all those technologies, you need policy that allows you to use them and access them, and policy that incents research that's driven, that's field specific, that's really focused on the farmer. Because there's a lot of dollars that have been committed by individual countries and globally in this space. And getting them committed into the right channel so that they're going to be effective for next step is probably an important tool we don't talk about maybe enough. We're really focused on the farms, as we should be here, but I think that's a real opportunity. The crystal ball would be stunning. I think we'd all like to have that. And weather reporting, I shared the story coming out of Kenya. India is the same thing. They said, just even not so much specialized, but knowing when a typhoon was coming. Not everybody has access to that, but that would really determine when they were going to put down a fertilizer or when they were going to open a canal for, if they were using canal irrigation systems. Those simple decisions that can be totally changed by a simple bit of information could be a stunning change in the productivity of that farm and also the production of the environment that farm is on. So knowledge is key, no matter where you're going at. And where you get it from is probably important as well, but having the knowledge and information you need is an important tool.
and measure the knowledge about your soil.
Yes.
Measure soil samples, and if you don't have the knowledge to address the levels yourself, then you need help doing it. I think absolutely that without doing too much effort or changes, we can increase the yields globally if you just understand your numbers. And we have the GPS systems on our tractors. We can put in whatever we need to get the right pH, or to get the soil to work as you want and get even qualities of products as well.
So it's all about the numbers. I think we've got time for a couple more questions from the audience.
One at the back.
I'm going to rely on my microphone colleagues.
Hi, is that on? Yeah. Hi, I'm Jo Philpott, agricultural economist in Overseas Aid. About 5 years ago, I work a lot in the deserts, 50 times to East Africa, mainly in sort of the arid lands where they keep a lot of livestock. And about 5 years ago, because I see a lot of inappropriate stuff done by the aid agencies, bringing in Holstein cows into really arid, unsustainable programming. So 5 years ago, I went off to Cirencester, and my understanding is young farmers know about soil, know about, the impression I got was the youth know about the soil and organic matter and climate change and all the sort of challenges, and the older farmers raised in the 70s have a sort of more sort of chemical outlook. I mean, are you guys optimistic that you can, with your knowledge of soil and organic matter and herbal lays, that you can, are you optimistic or are you quietly pessimistic?
No, I'm always optimistic about everything I do. And I talk about the things I do to most people I meet. And I'm not telling them that this is the right way. It might be, but education is everything. And otherwise, a better way of farming is just a generation away. Maybe they use, as you said, they are older farmers, 60, 70, 80 years. Maybe their son is addressing, or otherwise I'll rent their land and I do it another way.
No.
Police, yeah.
No, I'm really optimistic because I've seen on farm that some of my trials that have worked, especially with the intercropping of different different crops together, are actually producing good yields and with lower inputs. And therefore, if it's so wet that I can't get a sprayer in the field, it doesn't matter quite as much. So there are new and different ways of doing things, and they won't look like what we've done on the farm before, that I think will keep us going.
Can I address that as well? Because when I was talking about the WhatsApp group that the GFN members are a part of, and we're a very diverse group, not only in geography and gender, but in age as well. And so there's a lot of institutional knowledge in some of these farmers, and some of them have been on their farms. One from Canada said, this is my 53rd year, and yes, the climate has always changed, and by the way, I've actually seen a little bit of this before. And so I think there's that evening of the concern level and saying, to a point, there's nothing new. Someone else has already lived through it. It may be coming faster, it may be higher highs and lower lows, like coming quicker together, but the actual pieces, there have been views of it, levels of it that have already been dealt with, and so that sharing of information and an understanding that we just take time, we observe, we listen, we share information, and that institutional knowledge from those that are older is actually, I heard you say as well, it's such an important part of what that farm is, and then you're building on it. That's called continual improvement. We do that in every part of our lives, and so there's significant value in all of that.
Thank you very much. And I can see we've got a few more questions in the audience. We do have a hard stop at 6, but I implore you, the event is not over. We will be having a networking session outside this room. So please come and speak to any of our speakers, ask your questions, ask any of my BASF colleagues. But I think that just leaves me to thank all of you guys for joining our panel this afternoon. We had the joy of speaking before Christmas, and I knew this would be a great session. Your passion, your enthusiasm for farming is always so tangible. So thank you very much. And Thank you to everyone here for coming today.
Thank you.